If it wasn't already clear enough to you as a Cougar fan, simply put, the BYU men's basketball program, they're broken.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, 14-year credentialed media member at BYU, your resident expert and insiders, your host here on this show. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you for making all of us folks at Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Coming up on today's show, BYU basketball suffers yet another blowout loss, this time at the hands of the Cincinnati Bearcats. And yeah, where do they go from here? Well, we'll try and make heads and tails of that. Then we're going to talk about roster construction for Kevin Young and company. That might be the one area that I think that he and his staff have to answer for the absolute most for how this season has gone. And then we'll finish up today's show with some thoughts on AJ Dybantsa and the NBA draft. Is he serious about coming back? I don't think so, but hey, we'll talk more about it ahead on today's show. It's all brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and get $20 off your first ticketing purchase. All right. If you did not watch last night, the BYU men's basketball program suffered a 90-68 loss to the Cincinnati Bearcats, a 22-point blowout, and quite frankly, it doesn't even feel like it was that close for the BYU Cougars, especially in the final 10 minutes of this game. I'll just say this right now. The BYU men's basketball program, the way it's trending right now, they have a maximum of 3 games remaining. You're probably thinking, well, what 3 games do they have, Jake? Well, they have senior night against Texas Tech on Saturday night. They'll have 1 game in the Big 12 tournament. And by the way, Texas Tech was upset at home in Lubbock, the number 10 ranked team in the country, by the TCU Horned Frogs. By virtue of TCU upsetting the Texas Tech Red Raiders, BYU is now guaranteed that they will open the Big 12 tournament without a first-round bye. There is no way that they are not going to be playing the first games of the Big 12 tournament. And I can either be Utah or Kansas State, your arch rival, or a team that gave you a pretty stiff test in Manhattan earlier on this Big 12 season. So those are the 2 games that you obviously are looking at. And then I know a number of you asked, well, is BYU going to fall out of the NCAA tournament altogether? The metrics still bear out. BYU, by virtue of the quad 1 games they have played, the quad 1 wins that they have, you look at the net ratings, you look at KenPom, you look at all these different rating systems that go into the NCAA tournament selection committee's formula and the resume. BYU is a lock for the NCAA tournament. I know that some of you are thinking, well, selection committee's got to look at this and say, we don't want that. Here's the deal. It's still a television product. BYU still has one of the top 3 freshmen in a loaded freshman class on their roster in AJ Dybantsa, and they want him on the national stage, even if it's just for a one-and-done scenario. They still want that game in terms of AJ playing in the big dance. So BYU has 3 games at minimum remaining, but I'll be very blunt. I think it's 3 games maximum, the way things are trending for the BYU Cougars, because there is just no semblance of pride, of want to, and unless BYU finds some way, somehow, to defend with everything they've got, the beatings are going to continue. There is a famous quote from Rick Majerus. I'm quoting a Utah. No, Rick obviously is a legend in his own right, but he says, no matter how good your offense is, it can never outdo poor or bad defense. And poor or bad are doing BYU's defensive issues a disservice. They're downright bad. They're just horrendous on the defensive end of the court. They are routinely allowing teams to score 90-plus points against them, and they're doing it at home. They're doing it at road. It doesn't matter where they play right now. They are just plain awful on the defensive side of the court. It doesn't matter how good BYU can be offensively. They actually weren't even very good offensively in this game. It felt like that actually broke in this game against Cincinnati. This BYU team looks fundamentally broken. They look defeated. They look tired. And I wish I could come on this podcast and give you some semblance of a glimmer of hope for the BYU Cougars. But the best I can do is say, hey, March Madness, it's a crazy situation. It's one and done. It's win or go home. And in one or done situations, maybe, just maybe, AJ Dybantsa can put on a Superman cape and lead BYU to a win. That's about as good as I can give you right now. Is that good enough? I don't know. But the way things are trending for this BYU team, it's not good. And I'll be very clear that I'm tired. I'm so tired of talking about the same issues with this BYU basketball team. I wish they would give me something different to talk about. Maybe it is that the offense finally broke in this game, even though that's a very negative thing. They scored just 68 points. They shot 29% from three. They shot 41% from the field overall. They were just 68% from the free throw line. Like, the shooting numbers are trending downward. It's not going in a direction that has any sort of hope, it feels like, for this BYU basketball team to find redemption this year. And redemption may be gone and way over the horizon, and you're thinking, there's just no way to... I understand all of that. And that's why I'm so tired of coming on this podcast. And I trust me, it's a thing. Maybe it's just me, but I am tired of having to rehash the same issues for this BYU basketball team. Poor defense, poor effort, poor body language. There's just so many things going wrong with this team right now. And Kevin Young, yeah, he's going to have to answer for it. The buck stops with the head coach. I say it on this podcast all the time, and I'll reiterate it here. Coaches coach, players play. But as a head coach, as a guy who has got control of a major Power 5 program at the highest levels of college basketball that Kevin Young has, the buck stops with him. He will ultimately, whenever the season comes to a conclusion, have to answer for its failings. Because remember, the season started with a whole lot of hype about maybe being the first team in BYU basketball history to make a run to the Final Four. Well, does it look likely they're going to make that? No. Does it look likely they're going to make it out of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament? No. And that is why I think there are so many BYU fans that are frustrated with this. And I wouldn't be surprised if hundreds, if not thousands of you have already checked out on this team. I am genuinely curious. Saturday night was senior night, obviously, honoring guys like Richie Saunders, Keba Keita. Dawson Baker, I would assume, will walk, even if he hasn't made his decision on if he's going to come back for another year, because that's available to him. I am genuinely curious if we will see a full Marriott Center on Saturday night, as sad as that is to say. I think this BYU team, the way they have played, the way they are trending, a lot of Cougar fans are fed up. And I saw it on social media. I've seen it in the YouTube comments. I've gotten DMs from you, emails from you, expressing your frustration with a myriad of different things with this team. But until something changes, the beatings will continue. And that's unfortunate, because I would like to talk more positively about this team. But what positivity is there to glean from this BYU basketball team right now? Can you give me, comment in the YouTube comments? Call me out. Let me know. If there is positivity to glean from this, let me know, because I am having a hard time seeing the forest through the trees. And maybe I use that expression completely wrong. I think I did. But you get what I'm going on, I hope, here, is that this BYU team, they are broken. They are fundamentally broken right now. And I don't think there is really any answer to fix what ails them at this point. Now, I talked about the fact that the buck stops with Kevin Young. Obviously, it does. But there is one particular part of the way that this season has played out that I think he and his staff, and obviously his staff is going to be involved in this, have to answer for more than anything else, and that's the roster construction. And I don't think an answer for that might come until next season.
I'm Clea Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Number 1 ranked UConn dominated St. John's 85-49 on Sunday at Madison Square Garden, extending its winning streak to 47 games. The Huskies capped a perfect 31-0 regular season, including 20-0 in the Big East. UConn is winning by nearly 38 points per game, the third largest average margin in Division I history. Since 1999 to 2000, UConn has 9 undefeated regular seasons, as many as all other programs combined, and has turned 6 of those into national championships. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars a part of your day. If you are a true everydayer and you want to get the latest and greatest when it comes to all things BYU and support this podcast, join the Locked On Cougars Everydayer Club. Get ad-free audio episodes, get access to Locked On merch. You can get access to our members-only Discord server, one-on-one texting access with myself. Go to lockedoncougars.supercast.com to sign up today. That's lockedoncougars.supercast.com, or click the link in the show notes below because it's also there. All right. Kevin Young and the BYU men's basketball program, I think, have learned a very, very hard lesson, but a necessary lesson this season. And what is that? Well, I think it's the roster construction and the way they went about building this roster for BYU basketball. While I understand that you obviously want top-tier talent, you obviously added A.J. Dybantsa in this last year's recruiting class. Yesterday, if you missed it, you can go back and listen to the podcast we did. Bruce Branch is committed for next year. I think Kevin Young and the way that this roster was constructed for the 2025-2026 season that we're nearing the end of is that it has been fatally flawed, quite literally from the beginning, because look at it. They expected that their big three of A.J. Dybantsa, Richie Saunders, and Robert Wright III would be the lead pack and really kind of be the guys that would drive this BYU basketball program. But the players they surrounded themselves with, they surrounded them with, not themselves, the players they surrounded that big three with, all have not answered the bell to any meaningful level. Think about it. Keba Keita is a lob threat. He's a vertical lob threat, and they do not have an effective lob thrower on the roster. Jaeger Dielman, and one of the chief things that he made Keba Keita so effective with was his ability to throw the lob to Keba and really allow him to function and be an offensive threat. That has been non-existent for BYU, and Keba Keita has dealt with injury. He's not been as effective on the defensive end, and that's an issue. The three-point shooting around this team, you expected guys like Tyler Mrus. You also expected Mu Davis to come in and be 3-and-D type guys to really allow the floor spacing to allow guys like AJ, Richie, and Rob to function. Well, that's not been answered to any significant level. None of them. I'm also going to include guys like Dominic Diomande. I'm going to include Hadim Boop. None of them have proven effective to be 3-and-D guys. It hasn't been that. The backup center position, and I think the Bidu Ahmed pickup at the time was a smart pickup because you were looking at it and saying, hey, we don't have anybody, and that's nothing against Xavier Staten, but it was very clear. Multiple people who run in recruiting circles said when Xavier committed to BYU, he needed at least a year before he was truly going to effectively contribute at the Power 5 level for BYU, and that's borne out as he has been sidelined for better part of half the season, and he was ineffective before that. They brought in Bidu Ahmed, but while he's been a shot blocker, what else has he offered? Like that each one of these guys on this roster were projected or expected, or however you want to term it. They were brought in to make this team better, like the sum of its parts is supposed to be better than it is. And it's not been that way. And that is what Kevin Young, Justin Young, his brother, who obviously kind of runs the recruiting side of things, and quite literally everybody else in the BYU program, because there's a lot of analysts, there's a lot of assistant coaches who all are in on roster construction. They need to learn from this season and understand that, hey, it was fundamentally flawed. We erred on multiple fronts. We struck out on a number of guys we thought that were going to come in and be a big part of this roster, and go back to the drawing board and reassess how you go about this. I'm not saying that I have all the answers because, like I said, I'm not sitting in those chairs. I am sitting here in my studio in Saratoga Springs, Utah, talking about it. I am what I call a second guesser. The first guessers, if I was a first guesser, I'd be on that staff. I'm not that. But they need to understand that this roster construction was not it. And they've got to reassess how they go about building this roster. Now, I can freely acknowledge that you can say, yeah, they screwed up with this roster and they probably expected something different from it. Sure, I get all that. But the proof is in the pudding. So now, when you have gone through this, I think you can compare year one versus year two of the Kevin Young experience and say, okay, what was so good about year one? What did we do so well about putting that roster together that led us to a Sweet 16 run versus what went so awry here with this second year and this roster, which, let's be very clear, I thought that this second year, this roster, the way it was constructed initially, I thought I bought in. I was like, hey, it looks good to me. It's not been that. So they will need to fundamentally reassess how they go about roster construction this offseason and make sure that their assessment, and that means analysis in terms of metrics, the numbers that they're running, that type of stuff, along with can I get just eyeballs on guys, watching tape, and also looking at what guys' chief skill sets are, and make sure that each guy that you add to this roster, no matter how many guys are held over versus guys that are brought in, et cetera, that their skills complement one another. It would have been, I think, very prudent, and I'll go back to the point about a guy like Keba Keita, to have somebody on this roster that was capable of throwing a lob. And that was kind of the interesting part. And I talked with Jake Edmonds about this on the Loyal Cougars podcast earlier this week. He had me in to be a special guest host. And we talked about the fact that last year, so we're talking about the first year, the Kevin Young experience, is that Jaeger Dielman and Keba Keita were platooned together, whereas Dallin Hall and Fousseyni Traore are platooned together because those combos worked better together. So that's where they need to fundamentally reassess what they're doing here. And that will have to be something that Kevin Young and company will have to answer for. And like I said, the answer may not ultimately come for if they get it right this next go round until next season. And maybe by the end of next season. That it's kind of a long play. It's way out there on the horizon to consider that you're gonna have to wait that long to see if you got an adequate answer on that. But it does absolutely need to be addressed, the way that they built this roster and how flawed it ended up being. I don't think they ever intended for it to be flawed. Why would they do that? Why would they want to short circuit themselves and cost themselves an opportunity? No, they didn't intentionally do this, but they also have to answer for it, and they have to find adequate answer or answers to fix it. Will Bruce Branch be a better fit, and will they find better pieces around him? Will Dean Rueckert come in as another freshman stud that's coming in from Timpview High School? Will they fix what ails BYU? Well, those are just two guys. How many guys from this year's roster are going to be held over? Is Rob Wright going to stick around? Is Mu Davis going to stick around? There are a lot of moving parts, as there always is, especially in this era of college basketball with NIL, the transfer portal. You are going to watch the mobility of college basketball continue to be just that. Guys are going to move on, and it's nothing against these young men. They are doing what's in their best interest, and it's a business decision. But Kevin Young, Justin Young, all the assistant coaches all the way down, they are going to have to fundamentally reassess how they built this roster, try and compare and contrast what worked with year one's roster versus the failings of this year's roster, and hopefully find the right blend of skills, skill sets, strengths, and etc. to put together next year's roster. Because this year, it wasn't it. So hopefully year 3 is more like year 1 and maybe even to a better level than it was in year 2, obviously. All right, coming up next. We talked about it a little bit yesterday in a live show I did, but AJ Dybantsa kind of threw it's a bombshell about his status when it comes to the NBA draft upcoming this June. It's been long foreseen that he was going to enter the NBA draft. He's at worst a top 3 pick in this NBA draft. What are the realistic chances he would, opt to not go to the draft and return to BYU next year? We'll assess that next. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, Game Time is here for you guys with the biggest stretch of the college basketball season almost here. Buzzer beaters with everything going on, bracket busters, those unforgettable moments that everybody's talking about the next day. Being there live for something like that is bucket list stuff. The hard part is always getting those tickets, though. Long queues, prices jumping around, and surprise fees at checkout. The Game Time app gives you, the fan, the advantage back with the constant innovations, how you unlock amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. Incredibly simple to use. Game Time, their guarantee means 100% legitimate tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Here's the best part. Fees are included in the price you see, so what you see is what you pay, period. End of story. They have Seat View, their feature. You can see exactly what your seat view is going to be in the app. They have zone deals that let you pick the section, see even more about Game Time selects the seats for you in that zone. And I'll be able to follow teams and games in the app and get alerts when new deals drop for whatever game or games you're interested in. No stress, no guesswork, just a smooth experience from start to finish. That's exactly what you want during the busiest part of the season. Take a guesswork out of buying your college basketball tickets and do it with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account using the promo code LOCKEDON. That's locked on for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes, well, it's a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded and straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. TurboTax and your expert gets to work on to save you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not subscribed, rated, reviewed, shared this with your family and friends, please do so. And please consider being part of the Locked On Cougars Every Day Club, and appreciate all of your patronage, whether you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or if you're watching it on YouTube or however you consume the content. Thank you for all of your support. All right. Bit of a bombshell dropped. McKay Coppins from the Deseret News did what they call Deseret Voices. It's a new podcast series the Deseret News has launched where they're talking with influential individuals across a myriad of different spectrums. And McKay Coppins, who's one of the co-hosts of that podcast, he's a world-renowned at this point writer who's got BYU ties. Well, he interviewed AJ Dybantsa about a myriad of different things. But the biggest bombshell that was dropped in this interview was that McKay asked him, okay, well, you're obviously on your way to the NBA. And AJ essentially stopped him in his tracks and said, I didn't say that. Nobody is. I haven't decided yet. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, hold on. What's going on here? Here's the situation is that AJ Dybantsa, I think, really has enjoyed his collegiate experience. And by the way, he has never once uttered the words, I'm a one and done. I know his father, Ace, has made reference multiple times that we haven't said that we're done at BYU or in college after this season. I think it has been widely assumed. I would say that I would be hard pressed to believe that AJ Dybantsa is not going to the NBA draft at this juncture, because there are millions of reasons why. And if you know what I'm referring to, I'm referring to money. And I know that money's not the end all be all. And I get all that. But here's the deal. If you pay attention, AJ Dybantsa, the reports were that, okay, when it comes to NIL this year for BYU, that some people at BYU tell you that it's not as high as that is. Others will tell you it's higher, whatever it is. Whether it's $4, $5, $7, $10 million that he got in NIL, which, by the way, includes reportedly NIL deals with the likes of Nike and Red Bull, he is making quite a bit of money, more money than yours truly and many others of you watching and or listening to this podcast will literally ever make in your entire life. He's made that in 1 year playing college basketball for the BYU Cougars. Whether it's between $4 and $10 million, it's quite a significant amount of money. And I understand that, yes, he could command a king's ransom to come back for a second season at BYU or literally any other program in college basketball. They would pay him whatever it feels like they would be required to pay him to return for a second year. But there's a lot of people out there who will tell AJ that, yes, while the 2026 draft is absolutely loaded, it's chock full of talent, because I'm telling you, it feels like this draft could go 10 guys deep in terms of the year. If you're in the first 10 picks, and speaking as a Utah Jazz fan, that's an exciting proposition. You could get a really, really good player. And AJ, he's among the cream of the crop of those 10 or so top tier prospects. If I had my pick, and if I were the team, whoever it is, with the number 1 overall selection, I would run to the podium with the name AJ Dybantsa and throw it at Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, and say, that's our guy. I wouldn't waste any time. Make the pick, move on, and have a franchise piece to build around for the foreseeable future. And that is why I am really hard pressed to believe that AJ is going to bypass this year's NBA draft as much as the talent is there. Because let's consider the notion. Let's say AJ were to come back next year. The 2027 draft is considered to be far weaker than the 2026 draft. And AJ, I think, would absolutely be projected as the number 1 overall selection in the NBA draft. But there are people out there, and I could point you in different directions to who they are, that said last year, had AJ been eligible for last year's NBA draft that saw Cooper Flagg taken number 1 overall by the Dallas Mavericks, some would tell you they would have taken AJ Dybantsa over Cooper Flagg. And also, Cooper Flagg kind of pulled this same charade while he was at Duke last year. Well, I'm not sure. I haven't decided if I'm coming back for another year. Cooper, stop it. AJ, stop it. We know what your future holds, and that's at the NBA level. And I know, like I said, money is one thing, but it speaks very, very loud. The rookie wage scale for last year's NBA draft, the first pick, and by the way, the rookie wage scale in the NBA is you can sign for anywhere between 80 and 120% of the draft slot you're drafted in. So for the first pick last year, Cooper Flagg, it was the range of what he could make his first year in the NBA was between $11.5 and $14 million. Now, this 2026 draft, which AJ is a part of, the number 1 overall pick is expected to command as much as $14.5 million. That is the number 1 overall pick. If he's the number 2 overall pick, $12.9 million. Number 3 overall pick, which I don't think he falls out of the top 3, $11.6 million. And heaven forbid he drops to number 4. That's $10.5 million. If the top end of what AJ is believed to have been making in NIL is $10 million, the number 4 overall pick is already projected to make more of that next year in the NBA. I don't see any way that AJ bypasses the NBA draft to return to BYU for another year, no matter how much he enjoys his Book of Mormon class, no matter how much he enjoys the fan base. And he said they'll get in my ear. And I know that his mom has talked about the fact that she wants him to get a college degree. I'm all for that because heaven forbid something happens to me. She wants me to have a degree to fall back on. Guess what? A degree can be had working remotely, whether it comes from BYU or otherwise. You can still get your college degree, AJ. There is no problem with that. And like I said, money's not the end all be all, but this is what this kid has worked for his entire life, is to go and have the type of basketball career that I believe could be, in some cases, one of a kind. He could be an all-timer based on his skill set, based on his pedigree. Just everything about him screams high-level, all-star caliber player for a decade plus in the NBA. That is what the projection is. So while I appreciate the fact that he's trying to give Cougar fans something to chew on and believe, hey, maybe he wants to come back for another year. Maybe he does, but I think there's going to be a lot of people, and I think even his own mother will come down to the point of looking at it and saying, you know what? You got to go to the NBA, kid, because there's just too much on the line here. Let's say he does come back to BYU, and let's say, heaven forbid, he has something like Richie Saunders happen to him. And like I said, knocking on wood and praying that none of that ever befalls him. You have a season-ending injury, and suddenly your draft stock worsens. Talk about an all-time fumble. I don't think, and if I'm wrong about this, I'm racking my brain, and I've got a pretty good memory as to guys who have done unprecedented things in sports just in general. I don't think there's been a player of AJ's caliber, we're talking at worst a top 5 type NBA draft pick, who has ever bypassed the draft and run it back in college. So while I'm sure many of you are going to hop in the mentions, you did it yesterday, and we talked a little bit about it as well and said, well, money's not everything, Jake. He could decide to come back. Yes, he could, but it's not the smart move. Sorry to break your heart, but it is not the prescient move to make in that circumstance. Go to the NBA, get your degree in your off season, do classes remotely while you're traveling on these road trips with your NBA team, and go make that money, AJ. Go build your brand. Go be everything that we think you can be. He's established his foundation. The AJ Dybantsa Foundation is going to do incredible things no matter where he plays in the NBA. It will do things in Utah. It'll do things in Brockton, Massachusetts. It'll do things whether he's in Sacramento, Utah, Washington, D.C., just kind of looking at these different NBA lottery teams. No matter where he ends up, AJ is going to be a phenomenal force for good out there, and I'll be rooting him on. I don't care where he plays. I want to see him on the Utah Jazz. I'll be very clear about that. I would love to have him as a member of the Utah Jazz. But regardless, I wish him well, but I'm not buying it. He's not coming back to BYU. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. Thank you, as always, for all your support. You guys are absolutely fantastic out there. Cannot thank you guys enough for being what you guys are, and that is, quite frankly, the most engaged fan base, I think, in all of collegiate sports. So please continue to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're so inclined, join the Locked On Cougars Every Day Club by going to lockedoncougars.supercast.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we're going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 YouTube Locked On YouTube channel for more Locked On content. Or if you're listening to this on audio, check out the latest edition or editions of Locked On College Basketball. It's March. It is the time to really lock in with college hoops. Get up to speed with Locked On College Basketball wherever you get your podcasts. And until tomorrow, everybody, thank you for tuning in and being a part of the Locked On Cougars podcast.